We're in your hands, Paul.
Right, well, should I make a start?
Yeah.
Fine. I'm going to take you through a number of churches that I've visited over the years, but I'll give you a bit of background of why I am so interested in churches. And it really goes back to childhood, because my family or parents, when we went on holiday, which the second 2 weeks of August, we always did a tour of a county: Yorkshire, Lake District, Scotland, Kent, Sussex, Cornwall, etc., etc. And part of that was to always visit a local churches, and we rarely got through perhaps a village without having to call into them. And a church to me, when I was small, and probably still now to some regard, is a playground. It has so much of just entertainment there. Firstly, my first question was, could I go up the tower? Can I go up the pulpit? What could I climb under, or what could I climb over? And that was really my first experience of going to a church, and that was probably from the age of 2 upward. My parents guided me with giving me at some point a Ladybird book of churches and cathedrals, and this book had a great impact on me, because I think over the years, and the first church we're going to go to tonight, it goes through all the churches from Saxon churches, and this is Earl's Bardolph, which is in the county that I was brought up and we visited, right through all the architectural designs up to Salisbury Cathedral, which was in the news last year when some Russians wanted to visit it because it had the tallest spire in the country, and that sounds a very good reason to go to Salisbury. This book had a huge impact on me, and I think I read it from cover to cover, and gave me my love for church architecture. And I think I memorised most of the book. Over the years, though, and the other book I'd recommend and I used is Simon Jenkins' book, 1,000 the Best Churches. This book is particularly good because every church that he goes to has to be open to the public. So many churches are now closed for insurance reasons, but all the churches that he includes, 1,000 churches, are open to the public, and he puts them into county order, and he actually grades them from a 5-star down to 1-star. But this book has been invaluable. In fact, we've got 2 copies. One we keep in the car for when we go on journeys, so we can pick out and try to visit the churches in the book. And the way that he does a lovely summary of just each church and the things you should be looking out for. And I picked up, and the things we go through tonight have really taken from his book really over the years. Okay, so we now go to the PowerPoint presentation, and I thought I'd start off with the best church painter that there was, John Piper, and these are churches in actually Suffolk. And I really like his artwork. I only wish I could afford some of his paintings, but a bit outside of my price range. Okay, the first church we're going to have a look at tonight is down the road at Waltham Abbey. Who's been to Waltham Abbey Church? Yeah, good. Hang on, let's see why we're not going there.
Could you stop the pause?
Oh, here we are. Yeah. Right, Waltham Abbey Church, probably famous because King Harold was actually buried there following the Battle of Hastings, and there's a little stone in front of the east window outside showing the site where he was buried. But that's what I'm not interested in that really. Let's go inside the church into a side chapel. This is a Victorian stained glass window. And if you look at it, it looks pretty ordinary, doesn't it? It looks a standard, bog standard stained glass window, but there's a slight interest in it. It's not quite biblical. Can anybody tell me what's not biblical about this stained glass window? What isn't mentioned in the Bible for the nativity scene?
The greyhound sitting at the front.
No, that's the dog.
You're absolutely right. It's the shaggy dog. I don't think it's in the nativity story. It certainly should be. And this was one of the things, this was paid for by the great and the good when he died, and he wanted his faithful dog to be remembered for posterity. And so, because he had the money, he could afford to have it put into the stained glass window, which I think is rather charming, if inaccurate. Anyway, let's go back into the main nave of the church. I'm going to have to, this really made me absolutely angry when I saw it. So I have calmed down now. But when I first saw it, I could not believe what I was seeing. If you look up into the roof or the ceiling of the nave, you see a highly painted, decorated ceiling. Now, if you look a bit closer, they're all signs of the zodiac.
Oh,
Yeah. And which I don't think should be really there, do you? But yes, you know, you can see camps. I'm not very good with the zodiac. There's the bull, Taurus, the bull, the twins. Is it the twins? I don't know. I'm really not.
Gemini,
yeah. And all 12 of the zodiac. And if you read the blurb, they have a blurb where they try to defend this and saying that it has got some Christian merit, which I somehow don't really think it has, really. But that's my own personal view. I believe it for you to draw your own conclusions. But you don't expect to see the signs of the zodiac painted so prominently in a Christian church. I think we rely on more things than the signs of the stars. Okay, we're now going to go down to London, so I'm going to catch the train down to Bishopsgate now. Now, some of my favourite churches are the city churches, and only a week or so ago, Wendy and I walked round all 48 of the churches, but perhaps this is one of my actually favourite. London has suffered from probably 3 great impacts on the churches in the city. One was the Great Fire, and you see examples of 3 or 4 church towers, which are the only things remaining from the Great Fire because it acted like a chimney. So while the rest of the building went up, the towers remained because they acted, and the flames went up through the tower, and they survived. And you can probably see 3 examples of those towers today. The other great problem with the city churches was the Second World War and the bombing, and just from the German bombers. But I'm going to concentrate on something that happened in 1993 in Bishopsgate when the IRA set off a bomb which blew up St. Ethelberg, the Virgin Church, which is just down from Liverpool Street. They rebuilt the church, as you can see in picture 2, but it's kind of swamped by and this picture was probably the third picture was probably taken 4 or 5 years ago, and there's more buildings, tower blocks surrounding it. But if you go through the side gate of this church, which is now held more of as a community centre, we come to what I term the oasis in the busy city. So you go through these lovely gates, you can go in yourself, there's no charge, you can just walk in and you come into the Garden of Peace. And they have a yurt which you can go in and pray. You have to take your shoes off, but it's absolutely magnificent. It's sometimes hired out, but you can just walk in there, and it's the last thing that I expected to see when we went there, and it's really quite magnificent. So you can go in there and have a half hour of peace and actual meditation. So just down, it's 100 yards from Liverpool Street Railway station. Something easily missed, but absolutely a wonderful oasis amongst the probably city community there. Okay, we're now going to move on very quickly to Christopher Wren's Parish Church in Walbeck. This is down behind the Mansion House, just down by the Bank of England. This is a really wonderful church, and it was his own parish church, where I think he was the church warden of. Now, the church once again has been hidden. This picture on the left was taken when they were building the Bloomberg Head quarters, and now if you took the same picture today, you would not have that attractive view. The first clue is to look at the dome of the church. We'll come back to that, but the picture on the right, it always makes me, that must be the best coffee shop in a church I've ever seen. Starbucks. and actually, when I used to go down to the city, I always said to colleagues, we go down early, have a coffee in the shop there, and then I take you into the church. And this is a wonder. This is a real, what I consider a wow factor. Oh no, sorry. It's coming. The wow factor is coming. This is now how he looks with the picture in up front is the Bloomberg building. In fact, I've been there because I had a meeting there a year or so ago, and it's a good view of the church. But it's the only view you get. But when you go into the church, you have a wow factor.
Oh,
Absolutely
yeah.
magnificent.
Never
And
believed.
it really takes your actual breath away. And a good time to go to these to this particular church, or quite a lot of city churches when they reopen again, is lunchtime concerts. They lots of the Guild School of probably music, actually they will put on a free concert there, and they're really nice to listen to for half an hour during the lunch hour. Now, why can you see what he's done? This was a practice for actually St. Paul's, and if you look up there, you can see the dome. You probably get a better picture from here. That's looking up towards the dome, and this is what he used as a practice or a rehearsal for when he built at St. Paul's. And you can get that impression, don't you? I think if you go to St. Paul's, you just have it on a larger scale. Just coming back to this first picture, the church has been reordered. This church was reordered in the 80s, and a financier from the city commissioned it. And there's a big court case because there's a lot of opposition. Because if you go to the city churches, they're very, what I call a Protestant church, where the pulpit is the main, when you go in, you will see the pulpit as being the main part of the church, because the teaching, the word of God is the most important part of the church. Here, they've reordered it, and they brought the altar into the centre of the church. And the altar was designed by the sculptor Henry Moore. And it's brought the church into the centre. And so it kind of matches the actual dome. And it's quite a modern, extremely modern approach, but quite magnificent. And I would recommend a visit to this church when they begin to reopen, hopefully in the autumn. But go during the lunchtime, and perhaps actually grab a lunchtime concert. And that's the view of that. And that's a closer view of most unusual just altarpiece, but it's bringing the altar into the centre, and it's really a lovely design. And also the needlework of the kneelers going all the way around. Very colourful. Now, it's also got one other special feature, this church, something which still is used today. It's where the Samaritans started. In November 1953, the founder was Chadvar, the rector, and you used to find Mansion House 9,000. I think probably the number's changed now, but it's a nice touch. And they've still got the original telephone that he used to start off in his vestry, just at the back of the church, which is quite a nice thing. Right, we're going to move out into the countryside now to Dennington in Suffolk. Now, this is a beautiful village church, and the great thing about churches, you had churches, they used to be, and should be really now, the centre of the community. And every village, every town, every hamlet had a church. And the great thing about churches, they're all unique. Not one is the same. Different architects, different designs, different periods, but not one church is the same. That's why I love churches. You're always in for a surprise, either from the architecture of the church or actually what's in the church. Now, this church has got two things which I wanted to see. First of all, can anybody guess what this is? This was in the nave of the church, in the side chapel, to be honest. Can anybody guess what that is? It's to do with a school. You would have used it in a school because the church was used as a school at one time.
Is it the desk?
Yeah, you're on the right lines. Do you want a second clue?
Yeah.
It's sand. It's full of sand.
Was it a
Sand
round
pit.
table? Had it left
No. Bit more educational than a sandpit. Should I give you a clue?
Is it to write on in the sand?
Is it a writing
Yes.
table?
It was so the children could learn to write. And Wendy's hand, that, to be honest, was Wendy's handwriting. Well done, Wendy, because I wouldn't have done that.
You're getting better, Wendy.
Yeah, she's getting very good. And those little boards was just to wipe it out. What an efficient way to learn to write. I would have done a whiteboard. So, and that was in the 19th century, and the church was used as a school. But you could get the whole of the class in there. That was probably about, I don't know, 20 foot long. It's a real long, so you could get children both sides learning to probably do their maths as well and their English in there. And it became a repository that what tends to happen in churches, things get left in there and they can never decide what to do with it, so they leave it in there. And at the end, I'll explain that I've created something like that, and I'll come back to that super later. But like you can see, there's an old clock, clockwork also in the corner. Things tend to get left in churches and nobody likes to move them. I think that's true for all churches. Anyway, we're now going to see something which is so unusual. I even Googled it and I could not find it on Google. It's a rare mythical creature. Can you see that? Now, can anybody guess what it is? First of all, he's got feet which go over his head, and he's holding some fruit.
Bacchus?
Can anybody guess what it is? It's a mythical creature. Okay, well, according to the guidebook and also to Mr. Simon Jenkins, it's called a Siapod, S-I-A-P-O-D. Never heard of it, tried to Google it, nothing there. But his big feet were protecting from the sun, very practical, and the fruit he's smelling protects him from the contaminated air. Now, this was probably in the 13th century. Things haven't changed much, have they, really? But that's
It's a bit like the four pints in the Chronicles of Narnia, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's carved into one of the pew sides. So one of the side pew, and that's the only example I've seen in the country. So it must have been a very localised, mythical creature that somebody with great imagination came up with. I mean, a side pod sounds like a Doctor Who creation, doesn't it? You know. Anyway, but it's great to see. You know, it's wonderful. You know, you don't expect these things, and these things crop up. Right, we're going to go to one of my favourite churches down in Hampshire now. It's called Minstead, and it's the most hodgepodge church you could imagine. It's been built on the side, on the back. It almost looks like a country cottage with a tower, doesn't it? You can see the main entrance, and there's another entrance. Can you see the two paths? One path goes into the main entrance. The other path is a special path, which you and me wouldn't be able to go up. I'll come on to explain that in just a minute. But before we get into the church, look at the entrance to the church by the Lich Gate. Now, it's a resting place. I'm really disappointed with Wendy. When I took this picture, I wanted her to lay on that because that's where the undertakers would come and rest the coffin before they took it into church. You see it? But as usual, Wendy's a bit of a small sport, aren't you, dear? She wouldn't lay on it. Anyway, that's just a nice feature. I've never come across that, but that's where, and perhaps on a rainy day or when the undertakers are actually waiting to bring the coffin in, they can rest themselves rather than wait in a car, which they probably didn't have at that point. So anyway, let's go inside the church. Well, not quite. Let's go up that special road path. This was the entrance for the squire of the village. And he had his own room and his own fireplace, and his family would come in here and take prayer. Now, the advantage with this room was the vicar couldn't see them, but they could see the vicar and what was going on in the service. They were always locked away. The other story was that if the service was going on particularly long,
They go.
the servants would come and bring them lunch so they could eat while the service was on. I think that's an excellent
Fantastic
idea.
idea.
Especially with long sermons. And this was something very much true of the church in medieval times. People used to pay for their pews. So the richer you were, the better pews you could have, closer to the actually front, higher up, so you could be hidden from view. But if you were special, you could have your own room. But it's the only example that I've actually seen where they actually built an extension to the church for this. Anyway, let's carry on. This is such a wonderful jumble of a church.
I bet they didn't get a faculty for it, Paul.
Sorry?
I bet they didn't get a faculty for that room.
I do. Yeah, you've taken my words out of my mouth. Yeah. You probably don't know what a faculty is, but the Church of England, even if you want to move a pew, you need a faculty from the bishop or from the diocese, which could take weeks and years and months and could even end up going to court. But as this church grew, it did extend. In fact, they put an L, I haven't got it here, but there's an L-shaped extension, but they also put in a balcony. And then up the top, this was for the children to sit. It was a very precarious journey for them up a ladder. You can just see the ladder going up there. But that's how, obviously the church was, or the village was growing in population. So the fit people in, they had to put in a balcony and then a triple a balcony, which I've never seen a triple balcony before. This is quite nice. So you've got the litany. This is called a triple pulpit, really, but you've got the litany desks where you would say the prayers from. The second tier would be the lectern, where you would read from the Bible, and then at the top you would have your pulpit. Nicely integrated piece of church furniture. The great thing about this, it's not not that well put together, actually. It looks very cheap and rather nasty. It wasn't a rich church here. No, they obviously used local woods from the New Forest, I would imagine. Anyway, I haven't really talked about graveyards too much, but this one is worth talking about. This is the gravestone of Arthur
Conan.
Conan Doyle. Thank you,
Ah.
Wendy.
Oh,
Now, there's a story behind this because Arthur, and you can see people come here just for this grave, because if you see at the bottom, there's a bit of a pipe, and people leave artifacts, I think, in remembrance of Sherlock Holmes. Conan Doyle, if you remember, wasn't a Christian. I think he was a spiritualist
Yeah.
and was buried in his back garden. But when his wife died and they had to leave the house, they had to move him. So they thought it'd be a good opportunity to bring him into the churchyard and bury him with his wife. And the story goes, there was a great oak tree, and when they brought him in, there's a huge thunderstorm, and the oak tree fell across the gravestone, and they said it was God's actually wrath about bringing a non-Christian into a Christian graveyard. Great story, probably not true, but it's a good story. And this is the great thing about these churches, so many good stories, and we've got a lot more to come, so I'll quickly move on. That's just a closer view, and you can see the stem of the pipe there. Right, I'm going to cheat here. This is a National Trust property, and I thought I needed to tie it into the Bible study. This is Sandon Memorial Chapel, which is on a road between the M40 and the M4, and it's owned by the National Trust. Well worth a visit, and it's a war memorial from the First World War, and the paintings are by Stanley Spencer. And I like his art. I really like his work. And what's good about it, he was in the First World War. He was an orderly at a hospital, and on the sides, and I've got a clip which will take you around here. You see the day-to-day activities which went on in the hospital, and it's quite nice, really down to earth. But the picture at the back behind the altar screen, behind the altar, is what's going to happen when we're resurrected. You know, we'll climb up from our graves, and these are all the First World War soldiers will come up through the graves and go up to Jesus. And there's a picture at the top of Jesus bringing them home. And I thought that tied into our Revelation talk. It's a nice picture. More about that later, but so these are the pictures here. They're quite interesting. This is and I've got a video which I'll show quickly. I hope this works. It's only a very short video. Right, can you see this? I hope you can.
Yeah.
Okay. Worth looking. It's only a minute long, but I think it's worth looking at.
I can just see the title page, not a video.
No, it's not opening yet.
It's not open yet. Can you see that?
No.
Hear the music.
Hear the
No.
music.
They call it England's Sistine Chapel. The frescoes and paintings at Sandham tell the story of one
Paul, I
man.
think if you stop the share, then start it again, it gives you choice to show the video.
Oh, hang on.
What you see here today, more affectionately known as Stanley's Holy Box, represents...
Can you see that?
No.
No.
I think
Okay, we'll scrap that idea. That's fine. We'll move on. Okay, I'll send it around. It's worth looking at. It goes. It's
come up now, Paul.
What?
That link's come up now.
oh yeah.
Oh, well,
I think when you click on
Hold
it,
on.
Yeah.
No.
you send the link round.
I will send the link round. It's only a minute. Right. Okay, we're going to move on, and just a very quick talk about churches tend to be a repository for memorials for war. I mean, even Wormley's got on the side the people that gave their lives in the Second World War. This church at Woolley is just outside actually Bath in Little Hamlet. Quite an ordinary church, as you can see, quite pretty. I quite like the design of it. But let's go in. And sorry, this is like, lest we forget, this is soldiers that died in there. But as we go, it's a pretty little church, pretty ordinary. But can I draw your attention to two brass plates on the left-hand side and the right, just underneath those lamps. And if we have a look at the first one, it says, "To the glory of God, in thankful remembrance of the safe return of all the men from the First War." Now, there's only probably about 16 to 17 churches that can have this. It's called a thankful village, for it's where all the men who went to war in the First World War came back to the village actually safe. Nobody was killed from the village. Even rarer, in the Second World War, all the men and all the women also came back safely from the war. Now, there's only 6 or 7 churches that have this, and they're called thankful villages or thankful churches. I didn't know about this until we went here and just discovered it really just by pure chance. We're on just a walk, and so called a thankful church. And it's rather nice. But I've got to say, it was only a hamlet, and they probably only had about 20 to 30 people there. So the probability of them coming all back was quite high compared to if you went to a larger village like Wormley. There'd be a larger population there. But it was quite a nice touch. Right, I'm going to take you to one of my favourite churches, Kennington in Suffolk. John Betchman, who's another book I've got, he also has done a wonderful book on English church, which I also recommend. He calls this church the Westminster Abbey of parish churches, and it's a church which they forgot to do anything with. It's not been changed, I don't think, apart from putting electricity into it. That's the only change I can think there's been made there. Let's have a look at it. Oh, hello, Wendy. First of all, is the door. They've got 2 doors. One for summer, so it's a big door, but when it comes to winter, you don't want the cold air coming in. They've got a door within a door, and I like that. That's really nice. So Wendy opened the door to me. So let's go in and see what we can see. You can get a roof light, which is, I've never seen a roof light, but because at that point there wouldn't be much light coming, this was one way to get light into a church, because it would have only had candle power. And it's got its own rood screen, which the Reformation caused a lot of churches to be ransacked and all of the idolatry taken out of it. So you still got the Christ on the cross there. Rood screens I'm particularly interested in, because on Easter Sunday, the rector or vicar would go up and walk across to the middle of the beam there, and between a grate, to take communion, and would break bread and would take the service from top of that rood screen. But a lot of them were, and you had a staircase which you would go up and you would walk along. It should have had a rail. I think they must have lost the rail at some point. Okay, let's carry on. Now, if you look at the back of the church, looking towards the west of the church, you can see a raised part of it. That's where the church band would play. This was before the organ came in, and they would have instruments such as violins, trumpets, and things like that. It was a proper band playing. So it was before the time you would have had perhaps an organ or any other instrument. They had a band of musicians playing. And down in Dorset, at Thomas Hardy's church, down in Puddle Town, he left that church when the vicar decided that they didn't want the band anymore because they were too problematic to them, and they introduced the organ. But that's where the band for the church service would be up there, which is rather nice. also see a rather fine set of the woodwork. This was shoehorned into the church when the abbey was coming under attack from Henry VIII, who wanted to abolish the abbeys. They moved a lot of the monasteries' furniture into the church. Once again, the church is always a repository for things they don't know what to do with. Now, this is particularly interesting. If we look at the pulpit, you can see the old candle, which the candlestick, where which would illuminate the sermon, and to the right, the hourglass. You always know you're in trouble when they turn it upside again to do another half hour. That's probably why you needed your lunch there. Now, can anybody tell me what this post is on the right-hand picture?
Mhm.
No.
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 It's so you could rest your wig on it.
Oh, that's handy.
Very handy.
We
Yeah,
could do with one of those now.
we could, couldn't we? I think quite nice. It's probably the clerk of the town probably came in his finery, and during a long sermon, you probably need to take your wig off, I would have thought. Anyway, rather nice. Never seen one before. Only church, I think. There it is. This is rather nice. Very quickly, the pulpit. Standard pulpit, extremely high up, but it's got a tester, which was like the boom box. It helped project the sound of the vicar. So it's called a tester. Right-hand picture are the coat hooks where you used to hang your coats up when you went into church. Still there, the medieval nails, not changed at all.
There's a skull in the background, Paul.
A skull?
Yeah, in the background.
Oh yes, well that would be one of the memorials. I could do a whole talk on church memorials, which we'll come on to as a taster later on. But now this is nice. I like. Once again, we seen the altar in the round. This is the nearest we get to it in the square, and I rather like this. So when you take communion, you can go all the way round. I think the only other example I can think of is Dennington Church, Northamptonshire. They've got it as a perfect square. This is a three-sided square, but very unusual because usually the rail goes right across, but in this case it goes down the side. You can get more people in, and I think it's more of bringing us all together. So that's a really nice feature and quite unusual. What I also liked was the kneelers. People have gone to a lot of trouble there to actually produce individual kneelers, and it really brightens up the church. It's a nice modern touch. I don't know. I don't think they would approve of you kneeling on it. I think they're there to be looked at, but they are quite pretty, aren't they? And this is Wendy again. Can anybody tell me why Wendy's sitting there, and what would her job be in church if she's sitting there?
Counting how many people came in?
No.
Is it to do with the candles that go in the ring by the head?
No. Oh no, that's just a halo.
Well played. Well played.
No. It's at the back of the church.
Oh, is it to stop latecomers coming in?
Oh no, you're nearly there. It's where the children would have sat, and to make sure they were well behaved, a Sunday school teacher would keep an eye on them.
Okay.
Very good. I think they should reintroduce that. I think that'd be good. So you'd always ensure the children were well behaved. And also, they put extra seating in on the left. This would have been for the cheap seats, basically, but it's all tiered. So as the church grew, they couldn't extend the church. They put tiered seating right at the back. So this is where I would think the poorer people would sit. And if you look down the side, this is where you would pay to have your pew. So you would have a pew rental. Another good way to raise money, Jenny. Rent out seats to the congregation.
Doesn't work online though.
Yeah, no. And unfortunately, probably nobody wants to sit at the front of the church these days. So now this is nice. This is the treasurer's, and this is one for Jenny. Perfect for accountancy. You could only open it with 2 keys. Obviously, so great for accountancy. You needed 2 people to open it. One person could never open the treasurer's chest. Good practice, recommended. So even in those days, people weren't that honest, and you needed 2 people to count and check the money.
So the holes just sort of wear and tear, or are they where people used to put money in?
I think that's probably where the locks have been packed out at some point.
The holes kind of defeat the object somewhat, don't they?
They do, yes, but just go with me. That's what and if you had a long, boring sermon, you could always look out the window. Beautiful perpendicular window, which you could look peacefully out onto. And that's one of the wonders. They're so nice and quiet, churches. You can go and sit and look out and actually meditate. And that's one of my favourite pictures. Right, we go to Long Melford. A beautiful church. We could spend a whole talk on talking about Long Melford Church. It's just been described as a battleship, and it is, isn't it? It's like a cathedral, magnificent church, and and this is a painting by John Piper again, which kind of captures the magnificence of it. Suffolk is wonderful for churches due to the wealth of the woolen merchants, and they built wonderful churches in probably Suffolk, and you could do a whole talk on Suffolk churches. But I'm going to concentrate on the Lady Chapel, the building in front. And there's one thing in particular on this whistle-stop journey. Can anybody tell me what this is? Look at the numbers.
Yeah.
The dates.
Times table? No.
Times table, yes. Once again, the church was used as a school, and they had this on the wall. So it's rather nice that they've kept it there, and it's at some point. So it all goes up to 12, which is very good, and to 12 times 12 and everything. So they've kept, and I just thought it was quite a nice touch about the church being the centre of the community and being a very important part there. Right, now we go on to domestic violence. I'm pleased we're past 8:30 because I couldn't have spoken about this before this. And we touch on a memorial. The memorials in churches are fascinating. And this one in particular, you've got to carefully look at the husband's wrists.
Oh,
right. This is the Rushton family. They were quite wealthy, hence they've got to put a memorial in church. We wouldn't have one, not unless you were really wealthy like Tim. And what happens here, the story goes that Lady Rushton was at home reading her Bible when her husband came in, and our supper was not on the table because she spent her time reading the Bible. He was so angry at this that he flung the Bible into the fire, and at that moment his hands withered and he died.
Whoa.
Now, it's a lesson for us all, isn't it? Now,
not to throw the Bible in the fire.
Exactly. Now, the great thing about this, well, not so great, was the picture will show him without his hands. The Bible she's holding is slightly singed, just to replicate the story again. So there's an element of truth in it, but it's probably been enlarged. But they're 8 children, and you can always tell how many children they have because underneath you can count 4 children and 4 children. Unfortunately, all of their children, their hands withered as well. And they're shown without any hands. How true that story is, I don't know. It's a good story. Quickly moving on from her, we go to Norfolk, Stow. Now, the memorials, this is a memorial to Sarah Hay. This has actually been moved out of the church and put into the vestry, and the doors are closed now. But this is a wax model of Sarah Hay, which is lifelike, which is quite terrifying. But fortunately, mostly of the time the doors are closed. But it's like going to Madame Tussauds. That's quite unusual and quite unique. If you had money, you could put anything you want in church. Now we're going to go to Woodford, which is a local church, which Mark knows, and which is just only a few miles from Corby and from Rothwell. Quite an ordinary village church, but it's got a rather bloody past. Just before the Reformation, the rector there, who was a strong Catholic, decided to flee the church. But when he fled, he took all the church of silverware with him, and he fled to Belgium. And the new rector that came was so upset at this, he probably made it his quest to recover the church silver. And he went off to Belgium, and he successfully recovered the silver chalice. And to prove to his congregation that he had been successful, he bought the heart back of the former vicar to show what had happened to him. This heart got lost for many years, and also the chalice got lost, but they found it many years later, and there was a note in the chalice. I'm not sure how true this is, but it's another good story, that the heart of this retrograde rector was hidden in one of the pillars in the church nave. So they went about and checked it and found it. And in the nave, one of the columns in the nave has got the heart of this retrograde rector still there to this day. So you could sit at the service and still view it. So Ben, don't run away with the church silver.
Yeah, I'm going nowhere. You're stuck with me now.
Now, I'm going to keep it because it's not a church, but it should be a church. In fact, it's got so many symbols that it should be a church. This is once again this conflict between the Protestant church and the Catholic church. This is the Triangular Lodge at Rushton, not Rushden, Rushton. And unfortunately, I will share the video with you later. It's worth having a look at. But it's full of symbolism all the way through. As you can see, everything's a triangle. The building's a triangle. It's to show the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. So Thomas Tresham, his son, was then prosecuted because he was involved in the gunpowder plot. So you can see what type of family they were. They were high Catholics. So to show his opposition without being caught, he commissioned this building, which is full of symbolism. Up the top you can see, not very well, you can see a pelican, which shows the piety of God. And all the chimneys are triangular, buildings triangular. I'll move on from that. And everything, and up the top are biblical references from Ephesians, Isaiah, and Habakkuk. 93, there's lots of speculation, but that was the year that it was built, 1593. And as you can see, the windows are all triangular. 3 showing the Trinity. This is quite nice. So there's Jesus as the cross and 12 circles, which represents the disciples.
Hey.
This is Mark's church, old church. Mark was formerly the church warden there, and was also the man that will take you around what I'm going to show you. Now,
I sometimes let him out as well, Paul.
you sometimes let him out. Right, here we go. This is called Jesus Hospital, and this is the cause of the problem we're going to look at. When they built this, and it's not actually a hospital, I think it was more of an almshouses for the poor.
It was for the destitute of Rothwell, Paul.
And there was quite a few of them. There was. When they built that, they found they were building it on a graveyard. I think legend has it there were soldiers from the Battle of Naseby were actually buried there. Not sure how true that is, but that's what I heard.
Oh.
And of course, where would you move them? Of course, you would move them into a crypt in the church and forget about it. It was forgotten about for many years until somebody managed to dig a hole through, and guess what they found?
Oh.
1,500 skulls. Now, skulls, and yep, all nicely set out. And some of them aren't so well set out, and leg bones.
Wow.
Come back. Why did they only keep? They've only kept the skulls and the leg bones because on the resurrection day, you need legs to raise up and you need your head to see. I don't think they thought it through properly, but that was the rationale for it. Anyway, you don't expect to see that, but you can go in there once a month and you can go down and have a look at this and have a guided tour of the offertory.
Every Sunday in summer, Paul.
Yeah.
April to September, it's open every Sunday.
Yeah. And the only other example is down in Hythe in Kent, but I like the Rothwell one because I've got them on shelves. It's very nice. Right. I'm going to show you a church because I like going up towers, but this scared the living daylights out of me and should be at some perhaps amusement park. The Church of Our Saviour, Copenhagen. This gives you a view of the tower. Now, this is most unusual because it's got a spiral staircase on the outside of the spire.
Word.
So you can go up right up into the gold orb, but you're on the outside. You can still use it, only on when it's not raining or when there's not a thunderstorm. But when we're on holiday there, that stood out to me. I said, we've got to go to here, Wendy. And so we did. And there's no safety net. She's just got a spiral staircase which goes up and gets narrower and narrower. It's not so good when somebody's coming down the other way. And it goes to a point right at the top, just under the orb. But it was the most terrifying thing I've done for many years. The view over Copenhagen was brilliant, and you could see the bridge, which was made famous by the detective story The Bridge, which links Copenhagen and Sweden. But the reason for it, very practical reason they had this was the highest point in Copenhagen, and so they would have fire watches. So you would go up there and you could see the whole of Copenhagen and point out where there was a fire and send the fire brigade. But I could really recommend this, but only if you haven't got a fear of height. As you can see, Wendy was holding with 2 hands there. But well worth a visit if you're brave enough to go. Right, where are we? Claire, right, I'm going to quick run through now. Oh, hang on. This one's for Jenny again. This is called Peter's Pence. I do like a lectern in a church, and they tend to be golden eagles, either wooden or made in metal. This one is particularly interesting because, as you can see, the eagle's mouth is open. So people could give their collection, rather than on a plate, you put it into the mouth of the eagle. And it drops down there and could be, once again, only opened by the treasurer. What's slightly disappointing at the feet being guarded by these rather weedy looking dogs, which we're sort of like Dalmatian, not Dalmatians, what are those little dogs called?
Lecterns.
Dachshunds, yes, which rather disappointed me actually, but quite rare to see. There's only about 4 or 5 Peter Pence from Lecterns in the country, and always well for. Anyway, just a quick diversion into can we spot the bird competition here? Gold eagle, they're 2 a penny really, and that's a fine one at Oxford Church in Norfolk. The pelican slightly rarer, and it's one of the things as a child, my father and I got particularly interested in trying to locate all the pelican lecterns in the country. We found about 4. This one's in Durham, probably the best example. Another good example is in actually Norwich, and another one in Devon in the Rockham Church. But the rarest one I've seen is in Yorkshire. And I'm going to count on Tim and Ben here.
Oh dear, Tim's gone. It's just me.
Oh, it's down to you, or Jenny and Norm, I know.
Is that a turkey?
Turkey mentioned in the Bible.
Turkey.
Your turkey. I don't think so.
I can't think of
I may have missed it. I even Googled it, but no. But hey, no, it's Christmas. But once again, if you're rich enough, you can have whatever you want put in a church. Probably not so true today, but back in there, you could do. Perhaps it was quickly into Cavendish, beautiful village, beautiful church. And we've got a perfect example of the hourglass timer. Interesting, if you go to Glastonbury, they also have one, and they've got a little plaque, because during the Second World War, there was lots of like American servicemen there, and they must have got over. They must have visited the church and they broke it. But after they left, they then presented them with the funds to replace it. So they got this thing that the airmen replaced the broken hourglass. Just go to Lavenham, another beautiful Suffolk church. I could tell you about what all these mean here, all the bushes, but I haven't got time. Once again, I love the kneelers, and they've got the whole church, they've got the whole town community involved to show historical events that happened. People and organisations like the football club, the National Trust, Salvation Army, a bit like our wonderful tapestry in our church. But it gives a rambling club, important visits to the town, local legends. But one rather unusual and quite sad is brasses. You get lots of brasses in church, but this is the only brass I've seen for a baby. So you see it very small, it's only about a foot in length, but it's wrapped in swaddling clothes. So it must have been a young baby that died, and it's the only brass I've ever seen. It's usually of some famous knight or great person of the community. So it must have been once again a wealthy person who probably lost a much loved young baby. Quickly get to Bribridge Church. Once again, Suffolk, wonderful churches, never go wrong with Suffolk churches. And in the roof, we haven't got signs of the zodiac, we've got angels, beautiful angels looking over us, guarding us. But us being human, we are rather prone to the 7 deadly sins. And these are few ends. This one's my favourite, and I think could be attributable to certain people in Wormley, maybe. This one's called Sloth. And it shows a man still in bed when he should be at church. You see him with his blanket open. I think it's great. It's one of my favourites. I think it's so good. And there's other examples. I think they've been quite, and over them, they've got an angel, the godly angel, which we're looking up to heaven to see what the angels do, rather than looking at the 7 deadly sins. And there's some really good ones. Slander, the figure has its tongue sticking out. Gluttony, you see that one on the far right, rather fat stomach. I think they're so, lots of people couldn't read in those times, so these would have been great pictures for them, what not to be. Hypocrisy, a figure praying with his eyes open. Great. And Sloth, the one we've actually seen. There's one for there's one for there are some more, but I couldn't find the others, and I don't know what they are. There's Averacy and I can't remember them, or I must confess. But also quite amusing are the stonemasons. This is high up, and I'm sure they had a joke, because you always think things should be beautiful in church, but just either a self-portrait of the stonemason, or he tried to make the most ugliest man he could possibly do. And this is high up, you can hardly see it, but look at his awful teeth. Dreadful, don't they? But in this beautiful church. Now, I'm going to finish with Hadley Church, once again in Suffolk. And it's a nice church, interesting things, but it's a church with a life. It's a church that's used every day. They have drop-ins for the older people here on the left, and they have a youth club as well. So I feel it's a church that's alive, and it's bringing things in which once again bring the church into the centre of the community. And very much, when we went, we could have had a cup of coffee there, and the church is open every day of the week, and is very much at the heartbeat of the community, which I think all churches should be. There should be a history or perhaps a museum. I'm going to tell you a secret compulsion I have. From a child, I've always liked going up pulpits. If I could go up a pulpit, I would. And I do. I've been up so many pulpits, and going up churches ones quite easily, because there's never a red cord across them. But when you go to cathedrals, there's always red cord across them. And that gets in my way. It doesn't stop me. I put Wendy on guard to make sure the Virgin's not looking. I hop over. And these are my top 5, which is Canterbury Cathedral, Durham, St Martin's in the Fields, St Albans, Exeter. And I also did Wells, but as I'm a friend of the Virgin's there, he gave me special permission to do so, which is great. And it's something, even now, we've also travelled on the continent, and I dislike churches on the continent because they have locked doors on them. You can't even get over them because you need a door to get into some of the continental churches, which kind of fraughts me somewhat because they're always locked. But English cathedrals are, and I've got this ambition to do all the major cathedrals, and I'm still working on it. But yeah, now, I occasionally ask, but it's more fun when you don't ask permission. You know, it's that you're doing something naughty in church. It's great fun. And I've created my own. I've talked about curiosities in all these churches, but I created my own curiosity. This is in Forty Hill Church. The church is opposite Forty Hill. When we still attended it, there was a jumble sale. And one of the items left over from the jumble came from us, actually. It was a porcelain shell. In fact, we sold one, and this one was unsold. Anyway, at the back of the church, there's a very nice plinth. So I quietly put it on there. Must have been over 20 years ago. They've even painted it. And when they clean the church, they carefully dust it and put it back with great reverence. So it's been there 20 years. And I'm now what I've got to do is create a story around this about how it got there. But I think it's going to be there in 120 years. You know, I hope people will. Well, yes, I did tell people when I gave a talk there and go, oh, we wondered about that, but it's not been moved. It's still there, and I just. Every time I visit the church, it gives me great joy to see it there. I haven't done anything at Worm yet, but I'm so minded to do something. Anyway, that concludes my talk.
Thank you,
I hope it was interesting.